mismo llegar que quedarse, y la violencia política es una forma de ejercicio de disciplinar a las mujeres para que vuelvan al mundo de lo privado y enfrentar la violencia, hacer buenas investigaciones, buenas leyes que permitan sancionar la violencia política. Es parte de las aspiraciones de la CIM en este programa de liderazgo de las mujeres. La aspiración histórica de las mujeres es estar en el mundo del público, que nuestro trabajo sea remunerado y que tenga un reconocimiento. COVID ha puesto en evidencia una profundización de las brechas existentes para el logro de este objetivo. Estas brechas existentes ahora dan cuenta de que podríamos tener un rezago de más de 2 décadas en el mundo laboral. Que el cierre de brechas que se previó que podía tardar 100 años en cerrarse, ahora se habla de 135 años para cerrar la brecha entre los hombres y las mujeres. Entonces nuestro objetivo es que miren el derecho de las mujeres al empoderamiento económico, que el statement "quédate en casa", que es un viejo conocido del patriarcado, no sea que nos quedemos en casa siempre, y que entendamos que la inserción de la mitad de la población, de este talento humano que tiene una serie de ventajas competitivas, es necesario para el crecimiento económico. De manera que la CIM está colocando esta realidad, está colocando las necesidades de las mujeres y está haciendo unas recomendaciones de rutas para poder cumplir con el derecho al empoderamiento económico y con el crecimiento económico que requieren nuestras empobrecidas economías en tiempos de COVID.
Esta organización es el guardián regional en defensa de la democracia, la libertad y los derechos humanos. Los países se han comprometido con estos valores a través de instrumentos legales como la Carta Democrática Interamericana, la Convención Americana de Derechos Humanos y todas las demás convenciones interamericanas. Nuestro trabajo es mantener los más altos estándares. Debemos ser objetivos, analizar los hechos, denunciar cuando veamos corrupción, inequidad o amenazas a la libertad. En esos casos no podemos ser neutrales.
than 100 years since the inauguration of this building, the OAS headquarters, our institution still brings together the peoples of the Americas to address our responsibilities as a partnership of nations. As we look to the future, our work must also focus on the construction of a positive agenda that continues to favorably impact millions of lives every day.
The COVID-19 pandemic brought unprecedented challenges to our member states and the people we serve. In response, the OAS Secretariat for Integral Development adopted a three-pronged approach by 1. Adjusting our portfolio of existing projects, 2. Exploring new projects to meet emerging needs, and 3. Expanding multi-sectoral partnerships. The results achieved in 2020 demonstrate the resilience of our member states and the commitment of the OAS SETI to work with member states and partners towards our common goals in the development of our region. Our Network on Competitiveness launched the COVID-19 Ideas Accelerator, sharing 250 tools, health solutions, responses, and recovery plans. The Network for Labor Administration published a portfolio of responses from ministries of labor to COVID-19, sharing over 420 measures taken to protect workers, employment, and income. Likewise, The Inter-American Teacher Education Network series, Teaching STEM in Quarantine, provided 117,000 teachers with key tools to continue advancing STEM education during the pandemic. Through its network and platforms, the Inter-American Committee on Ports promoted international and national best practices, guidelines, protocols, and recommendations on COVID-19 safety measures and continuity of logistic operations. Initiatives such as the Education in Times of Change platform allowed us to meet urgent needs by offering timely tools on virtual education and a dedicated space for ministries to share strategies, actions, and solutions. Other programs such as the Row Fund stepped up, providing emergency grants to offset the challenges imposed on our students by the pandemic. SETI's partnerships are adding value to member states in the form of technical assistance, training, and access to tools and services. In partnership with leading private sector institutions, we offered micro, small, and medium enterprises access to online tools and training, increasing their visibility and participation in e-commerce, a key to their survival and growth in the pandemic and post-pandemic era. A new OAS SETI Facebook initiative provided 85,000 MSMEs across the region with capacity building opportunities and WhatsApp business tools to aid response, recovery, and resilience building. The Caribbean Small Business Development Center's program achieved real impact, supporting new businesses, expanding sales, and driving growth. A new network of Caribbean SBDCs will broaden the program's reach. The Inter-American Committee on Tourism, the C2, convened ministerial-level policy dialogue in an urgent response to the impact of the pandemic on the hard-hit tourism and hospitality sectors. Policymakers and experts discussed biosanitary protocols, travel and visa facilitation, among other critical areas for the sector's recovery. Partnering with the George Washington University and the U.S. Bureau of Indian Affairs, we went ahead with the scheduled first Indigenous Tourism Forum of the Americas, pivoting to a virtual format and convening over 240 participants from indigenous communities, the private sector, and governments. SETI also integrated sustainable development practices in the COVID-19 response. The pandemic is a daily reminder of the links between water, health, sanitation, food security, and nutrition. We ensured the continuity of our water management projects in the Plata Basin and worked with governments and partners in the design of an investment portfolio valued at $90 million. Additionally, the Energy and Climate Partnership of the Americas continued to share relevant best practices and responses to the pandemic on energy and air quality. These few examples indicate our collective impact. We cannot do this alone. It is now more urgent than ever to address the region's structural weaknesses, to recover from the health, economic, and social crises occasioned by the pandemic and prepare for future shocks. It is imperative that we work together as we risk losing recent development gains and seeing millions fall back into poverty. It is time for the region to redirect course and pursue a more sustainable, resilient, and equitable future for all. We are in this together.
But the resilience building agenda is too big for any one stakeholder to address acting alone, and simply bringing together stakeholders, whether at the national, subnational, regional, or global level, is not enough. Effective, focused, and sustained coordination among stakeholders is paramount to provide countries with integrated and comprehensive support.
The OAS, as a hemispheric forum and honest broker, must continue to facilitate this process while we work with member states towards the attainment of the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda. Cooperation, collaboration, and partnerships that include all actors strengthen us, enabling us to be more than the sum of our parts. We can and we must work together. The future of our region depends on it.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. Antigua and Barbuda is present.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Ok, vamos a probar interpretación. Si me dan un segundo. Empecemos con inglés. Probando cabina de inglés. ¿Me escuchan? Cabina de inglés.
Buenos días, cabina de inglés.
Cabina de inglés. Probando cabina de inglés. Ok, no tenemos inglés. Vamos a francés. Francés, no, inglés no habló. Vamos francés, ¿me escuchan? Cabina de francés. France. Excelente.
nosotros hacemos un refresh, o desconectamos, salimos de la reunión, entramos, por si acaso, ¿vale? Vale. Me voy a salir del todo de la reunión de hecho de Kudo, voy a salir entera y voy a entrar.
Bueno, la CIM tiene una agenda enorme en el tema de democracia y de liderazgos. El primer ámbito tiene que ver con la gobernanza electoral, para que esta gobernanza electoral responda a las necesidades con las que fue creada, y es buscar los espacios de redistribución del poder. Después hay un programa interamericano sobre el liderazgo de las mujeres, donde generamos conocimiento y también tenemos cursos de capacitación. Hay un poderoso curso que ha llegado a más de 1000 mujeres con más de 15 ediciones, que es para candidatas electorales, en las cuales conversamos con ellas, pero también nos ponemos en una agenda de solidaridad y articulación y alianzas entre las mujeres, a pesar de las múltiples diferencias ideológicas o de partidos políticos. También hablamos de los temas de violencia política, porque no es lo mismo llegar que quedarse, y la violencia política es una forma de ejercicio de disciplinar a las mujeres para que vuelvan al mundo de lo privado y enfrentar la violencia, hacer buenas investigaciones, buenas leyes que permitan sancionar
ahora sí podemos
la violencia
probar español de nuevo.
De las aspiraciones de las
Hola Fernando, es que la cobre probando cabina española. Seguimos problemas.
Hay algo
Ok.
que no está bien.
¿Quieres que deje el micrófono encendido o lo apago?
No, déjalo encendido.
Ok. Aquí estoy.
COVID ha puesto en evidencia una profundización de las brechas. es necesario para el crecimiento económico. De manera que la CIME está colocando esta realidad, está colocando las necesidades de las mujeres y está haciendo unas recomendaciones de rutas para poder cumplir con el derecho al empoderamiento económico y con el crecimiento económico que requieren nuestras empobrecidas economías en tiempos de COVID.
Hoy, esta organización es el guardián regional en defensa de la democracia, la libertad. Los países se han comprometido con estos valores a través de instrumentos legales de la Interamericana, la Convención Americana de Derechos Humanos y todas las demás convenciones interamericanas.
Can we take our seats so that we can begin this meeting?
Los más altos estándares. Debemos ser objetivos.
Veuillez prendre vos sièges afin que nous puissions commencer cette réunion.
Bueno, nos escucharán doble hoy.
Madam Chair, Your Excellencies, Secretary General,
Madame le Président, Excellences, Monsieur le Secrétaire Général,
Madam Chair, with your permission, I would like to provide a quorum for this meeting. Before we start, I would like to...
Avant de commencer,
la calidad del audio no es lo suficientemente
au
bueno para
nom
interpretar.
de Monsieur Mendes, qui est absent aujourd'hui,
El problema de audio.
Madam Chair, I will now proceed to
je voudrais prendre la parole pour dire que le son et la partie technique ont été testés. Nous avons les différents pays du quorum, Argentine, Brésil, Canada, Chili, Colombie, Costa Rica,
El Salvador,
Cannot do this alone. It is now more urgent than ever to address the region's structural weaknesses, to recover from the health, economic, and social crises occasioned by the pandemic and prepare for future shocks. It is imperative that we work together as we risk losing recent development gains and seeing millions fall back into poverty. It is time for the region to redirect course and pursue a more sustainable, resilient, and equitable future for all. We are in this together.
But the resilience building agenda is too big for any one stakeholder to address acting alone, and simply bringing together stakeholders, whether at the national, subnational, regional, or global level, is not enough. Effective, focused, and sustained coordination among stakeholders is paramount to provide countries with integrated and comprehensive support.
This is the English channel.
Okay, English today.
The first English channel.
Perfect. We can hear you.
Kelly just got up for a second. She'll be
No
back.
problem. We only testing one cabin. That's fine.
Okay, okay.
Thank
very
you.
good. Yep.
Let's go to French.
1, 2, 3, 1, 2,
One
3,
person
cabine
per
française, cabine française, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, cabine française, me oyen. 1, 2, 3, perfecto.
Portugués. Cabina de portugués.
Eu vou, Sula. Hola,
Portugués.
buenos días, ¿me
Perfecto.
oye? Sí,
Perfecto,
vale,
gracias.
gracias.
Español. Cabina de español.
Probando español, cabina de español.
Okay.
¿Qué tal la ves?
Sí, sigue escuchando con eco, pero escuchamos todos los canales ahora. Ok. We are ready.
Madam Chair, Your Excellencies, the Secretary apologizes for this glitch.
Por este problema
Nous
técnico.
nous excusons pour ce petit problème technique et nous pouvons maintenant continuer nos travaux, Madame la Présidente. Merci. Excellence.
Excelentíssima Senhora Embaixadora Elizabeth Darius Clark, a pessoa de quem
Madame l'ambassadrice, autorité de cette table, messieurs les ambassadeurs, mesdames et messieurs. En premier lieu, je voudrais remercier la présidence du Conseil permanent de l'Organisation des États américains qui a convoqué cette session extraordinaire afin de célébrer la Journée internationale de la famille, date déclarée par les Nations Unies pour reconnaître le fait que la famille est l'unité de base de la société et l'agent principal de développement d'un pays. Je remercie les missions permanentes de la Colombie, de l'Équateur, El Salvador, Guatemala, Haïti et Venezuela qui se sont unis au Brésil pour demander cette réunion. Je veux dire que c'est un honneur de participer à cette réunion et de célébrer la famille à côté de tant de pays amis. Pour le Brésil, investir dans la famille est fondamental pour promouvoir
individuals. every human
todos
right
los
is
esfuerzos para
anchored there,
mantener
and
a la
Brazil
familia en el centro de
considers
todas las
that and
políticas
has it
públicas.
at the
Con
heart of all of its
el
public
gobierno
Et le
policies. At the beginning,
président
President
Bolsonaro a traité la famille de façon transversale dans les ministères. Aujourd'hui, les groupes de familles sont des bénéficiaires prioritaires des programmes sociaux de transfert de revenus, de logement populaire ou de régularisation foncière. En décembre 2020, nous avons mis en place la stratégie nationale de renforcement des liens familiaux afin, entre autres, d'appuyer, renforcer et coordonner des initiatives de prise en charge des familles dans les compétences de politique coordonnée des organes du pouvoir exécutif fédéral, ainsi d'améliorer les choses sur la base de meilleures pratiques. Afin d'encourager l'équilibre entre les responsabilités de la famille et professionnelle, nous avons un programme qui s'appelle Travail en famille et l'on cherche à éduquer.
Educar e incentivar a las personas a desarrollar una realidad de vida en la que se pueda cumplir con las expectativas que tengan que ver con el trabajo de las personas, así como de los miembros de la familia. Estas expectativas se pueden negociar y compartir con las parejas y en el dominio del trabajo y de la familia. Además de esto, lanzamos el Observatorio Nacional de la Familia, que es una unidad de investigación para promover el desarrollo de estudios que tengan que ver con el tema de la familia. Esta ha sido la referencia para el desarrollo de políticas públicas.
Public policy and a better grip on the scientific basis of the Brazilian family in our country and in the world. Another initiative has to do with income and opportunity, which aims at ensuring that women can be recompensed for the money they spend having to deal with their families when they're at work. We also believe that there are strategic areas that should be favored for women so that they can improve their knowledge and be able to come back after their maternity leave if they so choose, come back to work strengthened and with a better future. We're looking at comprehensive dignity for women, and therefore from conception to child care, women must be supported and respected for their role. All of this has to do with defending the family and certainly defending the right to life from the moment of conception. Sexual health in women should also be given all of the attention it needs, whether those women are pregnant or not. On that basis, Brazil, back in October 2020, launched one of the most important international documents that have been written on the subject in the last decades. I'm talking about the consensus framed in Geneva on the role of women and family. This was a historic policy declaration by which signatory countries affirmed their sovereign right to legislate in a number of areas without preferences or interference, rather, the interpreter corrects herself, interference from anybody outside that country. There is no international right to abortion, and the consensus in Geneva, to which I refer here, states the obvious. So that document is a consensus among sovereign countries. Now, we understand that issues that are so fraught as is the question of abortion, will likely not obtain international consensus, but every country must decide for itself where it stands on the subject and reflect that position in its domestic legislation. We celebrate the family, the child, from the moment of conception and as it grows in his or her mother's womb, has the absolute right to be defended by society at large. That is why here I am so pleased to reiterate the commitment of Brazil to the strengthening of the family and the defense of the right to life. Let us leave no family behind. Thank you.
Rosie, you need to sign that.
Madam Chair, the state of Colombia is particularly pleased to be with you to commemorate the International Day of Families. And we wish here to pay tribute to the leadership of Brazil, the Minister of Women, Family Affairs, Cristina Brito, is here representing that with her first secretary. We thank them both, and we thank every country present here, Ecuador, El Salvador, Guatemala, Haiti, and all of us who supported the initiative. A commemoration such as today in the multilateral context of the highest forum in our hemisphere is not only an opportunity to celebrate the value of families in our American culture writ large throughout the hemisphere, but also a time to underscore the commitment that we should muster in these new times with its new challenges. Let me offer 3 thoughts for today that I believe and that my country believes falls under the aegis of this theme that the UN has launched on the International Day of Families. I refer here to families and urbanization. I will speak particularly to a couple of the special challenges that face families in our continent. Secondly, very briefly, I will speak to Article 17 of the American Convention on Human Rights. And finally, I will evoke some of the responses of the state of Colombia, which I represent here, to defend and protect some of the most vulnerable families in the present day. I'm sure that in spite of our familiarity with the theme, you will be surprised by the following. More than half of the families in this country live in urban and areas, and more yet to come. 2/3 of the population in Latin America live in cities of more than 20 million inhabitants, and almost 80% are urban. Colombia is no exception. In the last 50 years, Colombia registered a strong tendency towards urbanization. Back in 1950, the urban population represented 38%. But today, the estimates show that for 2022, 76% of Colombia will be living in an urban milieu. This brings with it a number of urban deficits, urban challenges, poverty, informality, precarious work, the lack of basic services of quality that can be relied upon, trouble with urban transport, lack of this, lack of that, no green areas are not enough. And need I say, with the advent of COVID-19, all of these have been exacerbated. Despite the recovery in our economies, in our last report, we have noted that a number of the most devastating aspects of the pandemic have actually hit the families, and particularly the poorest families, most. Those are, of course, the ones we need to protect best. I'm talking about 30 million jobs that were lost in the region. And the loss of that income, need I tell you, have particularly hit the members of the families that were poor to begin with. And among these, yet again, no surprise, women, many of them heads of families. So we're talking about a backward movement of some 20 years. ECLAC tells us that 1 of 2 women was not in the labor force during this time, and unemployment among women went to 11.8%. The COVID crisis has also hit the workers in a differentiated manner and certainly disproportionately affected young people. For children and adolescents, the interruption in their schoolwork was very difficult. And that generation may, in fact, become a lost generation, according to some of the reports, not only of ECLAC, but of the UN itself. That generation calls out for particular help and particular assistance as they try to move forward. One of the effects of the pandemic, as we know, was also the generation of differentiated impact on women and families that were traditionally facing difficult times. The rural, the indigenous, Afro-descendants, the persons with handicaps, migrants, and particularly women among them. COVID has only exacerbated the vulnerabilities that were there to begin with. What then does Article 1717 of the American Convention mean to us in terms of the commitment that we need to take from a policy standpoint? Has to aim as the family as the natural basis for society. I think these days we would do well to consider what specific measures we must take to offset these negativities, putting at the center of all of our actions the human being. That means there has to be a differentiated approach. This is not just something that governments, that the state with a capital S can carry out. This demands that we all consider the common weal, what must be put forward as the particular interest of society. But in order to come up with the necessary measures to really boost our potential, to pay attention to each of the members of the families, these measures has to look at what dignified life can look at in a context of growing urbanization. There has to be public credit offered for housing, looking at the informality in the sectors, particularly for women who are heads of families with small children, conditions that will allow mothers and fathers conciliate the demands of work and their families, including sometimes persons with disabilities who must have the presence of an adult nearby. We need universal health coverage. We need integral and comprehensive understanding of what health is, and as the minister pointed out, particularly so with regard to women. We need quality education, and that strengthen protection for those who are vulnerable in the first place. These challenges are hard in any era and any place, but in our hemisphere, with the limitations we have, they are certainly a challenge. And as I move to close, let me simply very quickly make a list, dare I say a laundry list, of what the Colombian government thinks is necessary, not only today, but as we move forward, in order to obtain and to guarantee the kind of exchange that will really help the family. There are 8 programs that the governor of Ivan Duque has set up for special access to subsidies, financial support that has made a difference in the ability of families to get a roof over their heads. Migratory policy that has paid particular attention to the families of Venezuela that are fleeing. A model, some policy architecture, as it were, that fosters access to electricity, to water that didn't have it before, families being able to live on their own land. This is our emphasis on rural families that need to have their spaces. We also are ready to share more details if you should be interested, but I know that time is of the essence. So let me simply say that the national architecture that we have set forth in Colombia, to which we are committed, we believe are patent proof of the legal and political commitment that we have affirmed vis-a-vis the families. Colombia is a member of that Geneva Consensus to underscore its very, very deep commitment to families, to leave no one behind.
Thank you, Madam Vice Minister, for your presentation. I now give the floor to Ms. Soledad Garcia Manez, Special Rapporteur on Economic, Social, Cultural, and Environmental Rights of the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights. Ms. Garcia Manez, welcome. You have the floor.
Good morning, Chair of the Permanent Council, esteemed members of the panels, observers, delegates, representatives, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for giving me this opportunity as the Special Rapporteur on Economic, Social, Cultural, and Environmental Rights of the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights. The pandemic has changed the life of American families. It has been a crisis and also a social and economic threat. It has created challenging situations, especially those who already suffer from inequalities. We are living in a context of vulnerability marked due to the crisis of care and health, and also worsening hunger, poverty, and then we have climate change. Therefore, it is necessary to reflect on the impact of the crisis on families now that we are commemorating the International Day of Families. The pandemic was a crisis for families, leading to a change in lifestyle, new realities like telework. And so there was also the stress of thinking about the virus and getting sick. The pandemic has affected our mental health and our physical health. During the pandemic, the Commission has referred to those who have lost loved ones due to COVID-19 and also provided guidance to states. The focus on human rights with a gender approach, in other words, non-discrimination and equality, the intersectionality of rights, ESCE rights, and the right to health. These are necessary to be able to address this issue in the Inter-American system, which promotes all human rights for all people. This means, first of all, to recognize that Article 17 of the American Convention provides that the family is a natural basis of society. Diversity of families is also key to human rights. This was established by the Inter-American Court in Rifoninos versus Chile, the American Convention does not have a closed idea of what a family is, or a traditional idea. We must have an intercultural approach to family. Families have different structures in keeping with realities and culture. This, for example, occurs in indigenous cultures. The court also recognized, with respect to reparations, and when they decided who were the family members of victims in different cases, the court has stated that states must ensure access to the rights under domestic legislation, including those who are same-sex couples, without discrimination with respect to heterosexual couples. When we look at the impact of the pandemic from a human rights approach, this means we must see how different groups who have historically been vulnerable or discriminated against have been impacted, such as women. We see the disproportional effects on women's life, to lead a life free of discrimination, to have sexual and reproductive rights, and we see that women have suffered the brunt of the pandemic with respect to care and other issues. In the resolution of the Commission on Human Rights in the Pandemic in the Americas, the states must include a gender approach based on an intersectional perspective during the pandemic, taking into account the different contexts that worsen women's vulnerability. The Commission has also called upon states to strengthen systems to help women who suffer from violence, to give them better access to sexual and reproductive rights services, and to also disseminate information in this respect. UN Women has stated that resources from the states must also address the impact of the pandemic on women, and that women must be at the heart of the response to the crisis. Also, looking carefully at socioeconomic plans to help women and girls have a better future. We must recognize that care, the right to care, is a human right. Also, with respect to the LGBTI collective, many times this group is not ensured their rights or their access to Social Security. Thus, we have urged states to provide access to LGBTI persons to the social safety network in an integral way. The Commission has taken note that many states in the region have also included the advisory opinions and judgments of the court in their legislation and have recognized the diversity of families. But we see that the lack of protection for families, same-sex couples above all, is a problem, and that they face many obstacles that threaten their rights. On different occasions, the Commission and our rapporteurship have heard about the challenges these families face with regard to Social Security, health, and access to education, and full recognition of maternal and paternal leave, which means that sometimes these couples may have a child that is sick, or their wife or husband are sick, and they do not have access to the right to take care of them. We see different initiatives to give access to people, this to avoid social exclusion. Thus, we call on states to have legislation that is comprehensive and includes trans people and diverse families and allows for people who express their identity in different ways. And with respect to children and adolescents, the pandemic has affected their rights, as UNICEF has stated. Before COVID-19, children had 2 times more probability to live in poverty. Now it is even worse. Children and adolescents are facing a very uncertain future. What is very concerning are the effects on the pandemic on educational systems. We have dedicated a specific report of the Commission to this. We also must recognize that elderly people have also suffered during the pandemic. The Commission has stated that these people must be protected by special measures. There need to be contingency measures taken. We have to look at protection from the virus. But these people also need to be connected to their families if they are in long-term care. We need options for them so that they can be in contact with their families through the phone or through the internet, using any other digital means. We've also referred to different situations that vulnerable groups are facing. People who are in jail, disabled people, people who have no mobility, indigenous peoples. We must look at all of these groups and looking from a family and intersectional perspective. We must have a human rights perspective. To conclude, I'd like to point out or highlight 3 ideas. The protection of families is a right that is complex and indivisible, and it is linked to non-discrimination and the right to equality. The American Convention, it must be also complemented by other treaties, the Protocol of San Salvador, the Treaty of Belém do Pará, Convention against discrimination, intolerance, and racial discrimination. The right to have a family is also linked to reproductive rights of persons. Their decision to have children, not have children, to have X number of children, finally, the right to protection of families, of people who live in poverty or extreme poverty, especially in urban centers. This means that the protection of these families must be a priority for all American states, and thus we must recognize the programs that Brazil and Colombia have, for example, and that other countries are adopting, and we encourage countries to continue in this vein. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Garcia Monette, for your presentation. I now give the floor to Dr. Sonja Kaff, Regional Advisor on Adolescent Health at the Pan American Health Organization. Dr. Kaff, welcome. You have the floor.
Ms. Kaff, could you please request the floor? Ms. Kaff, do you hear us? Could you please request the floor, the blue button at your... There you are. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, and apologies for the technical difficulties. Honorable ministers, vice ministers, ambassadors, esteemed participants, We thank you very much for this invitation to PAHO to contribute to this important event. As mentioned, the International Day of Families was established more than almost 30 years ago by the United Nations by resolution in recognition of the important role of the family in development and well-being. As also mentioned, this is the recognition of the critical role of the family in the construction of health, wellness, and development is also recognized in relevant UN resolutions, such as the preamble to the Convention of the Rights of the Child, that recognizes the family as the natural environment for the growth and development of all its members, in particular children and adolescents. There might not be an agreed definition of what the family is, but there is agreement and broad-based agreement on the primary functions and roles of the family. First of all, reproduction, and reproduction not only in the biological sense, but the reproduction of values, of practices, of routines, of beliefs and behaviors, socialization of the next generation, provision of a sense of identity to members of society, protection of the members of the family. These are all critical roles that we all agree on that the family fulfills. There are various functions and mechanisms when it comes to the family and development that are of interest. But what is of interest in the area of health and development is the public health mechanism, which recognizes the family as a social determinant of health. And there is very strong evidence of the critical role of the family and the influence of the family as a social determinant of health in the fostering of values, beliefs, practices, and routines that can either harm health or can help build health. The family is also a very important gatekeeper to healthcare. The family is very often the mechanism that decides how, when, and if to seek care. A landmark document from the Lancet published in 2016 recognized the critical importance of the family across the life course, from childhood to old age. Initially, the family of origin, and then later on, the family that is constructed by the person itself. In this publication, the Lancet Commission on Adolescent Health elaborates on the persistent and continuous role of the family when it comes to the health and development of its members across the life course. It was already mentioned, and we all know that the COVID-19 pandemic has created additional burdens for the family unit. We can speak about the expanded role of caregivers when it comes to caring for ill family members, but also caring for the family unit in a context of physical isolation, social distancing, disruption of routines. But what we have learned from PAHO perspective is that the burdens that are created and have been created by the COVID-19 pandemic can be countered through interventions that will strengthen family resilience. And what is family resilience? Family resilience is the ability of the family to overcome serious hardships and to achieve a positive outcome. Some of the interventions that can help build or strengthen family resilience include building a sense of self-efficacy and control in families, meeting the basic needs of families. We know that food systems have been interrupted. There's an increase in food insecurity. but meeting the basic needs of families helps build family resilience, but also connecting families with sources for support, and mobilizing sources for support. And therefore, as a part of the response to COVID-19, and definitely when we speak about the recovery phase, interventions that will strengthen family resilience and will build family resilience are essential, should be an integral part of the recovery package. Within PAHO, a family-focused approach is cross-cutting. You know that PAHO, within our department, we work on immunization, health promotion, social determinants of health, a healthy life course. And within the work that we do and the technical cooperation provided to member states, a family-focused approach is a priority and is essential. What does this mean? First of all, we recognize the fundamental role of the family in the production of health and well-being. And we provide support to member states to help strengthen this fundamental role. It also entails application of a holistic, multidimensional approach to interventions, including health services. And this holistic, multidimensional approach entails not only considering the individual seeking care, the individual needing care, but also taking into account the interrelationship between family members and their needs, and how these needs influence each other and can benefit each other. And it also requires a life course perspective, looking at families from an intergenerational and multidimensional perspective. And of course, it requires interventions to empower families and to help build resilience in all family members. And therefore, we are thankful for this opportunity to contribute to this important event and this important commemoration. And we would like to encourage all member states to continue to seek opportunities to build family resilience and to incorporate a family-focused approach in policies, programs, and interventions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Gaff. To conclude with the initial presentations, I am pleased to offer the floor to Dr. Maria Sofia Aguirre, Professor of Economics in the Department of Economics at the Catholic University of America in Washington, D.C. Dr. Aguirre, welcome. You have the floor.
Miss Aguirre, could you kindly turn on both your camera and your microphone? We see you. Yes, ma'am. Oh, you're gone again. Back. You're back. Yes. Well, allow me then to begin. I'm trying to share the screen. Can you see it? Put it on presentation mode, please. Can you see it now? Dr. Aguirre, if you would like to request the floor again, and if you have trouble with the presentation, we can handle that, says the head of technical support here. Dr. Aguirre, we keep seeing this presentation in the vision. If you could make it presentation, and if you could turn on your camera. Can you see it now? Asks Dr. Aguirre. Let's wait to see if it changes. Nope, we still don't have it in the presentation mode. Well, that's very odd, says Dr. Aguirre. Can you see it now? No change, says the technical support. Why don't you just take it and say next and we'll handle it? The trouble is that I added a slide thinking that would help the presentation, says the speaker. Well, then let's go with the previous one that I sent earlier, because I don't want to waste more time, and I'm sorry for this. So let's jump right in. First of all, Madam Chair of the Permanent Council, I thank you for chairing this, and Dr. Almagro, all of you who are with us, permanent representatives and observers.
For switching to English. So if we can go to the first slide. So I wanted to begin adding another slide before doing this. And I would like to highlight that when we look at poverty and family structure, if we look just for comparison, Argentina, Chile, Brazil, and United States, what is interesting to see is the percentage of population on poverty when you look at extreme poverty, or relative poverty. It is larger in Argentina, Chile, and Brazil, but I wish I could see that you will see this slide with me, that it is significantly larger when we look at relative poverty. It is larger when we look at extreme poverty and poverty, but not that significant, that larger, much larger. We are talking about the order of, if we don't talk about relative poverty, where the significance is very large, the difference is very large. Argentina, Chile, and Brazil, when we look at extreme poverty, Argentina is much larger than Chile and Brazil, and then the United States about by 3 points. So it's not as significant as when we look at relative poverty. However, when you look at the gap that exists between the rich and the poor, once again, except for Brazil, that we are looking at 15.5% versus 9.1% in the United States. Again, the difference is not that large. But when you look at poverty by family structure, in the United States, and I want to say this because I think it's important, in the United States and across the world, the patterns are very clear that family structure makes a big difference when it comes to poverty. Now, why is that? Is what I'm trying to address today. And I will finish posting some questions that I think are very relevant for the upcoming decades with regard to the family, the threats and the opportunities for the family. So how does the family fit in the economy? I always say the economy has three functions: production, exchange, and consumption. For that, we need resources. We need resources for production, markets for exchange, and optimization and distribution for consumption. And with what purpose? Well, we need basic needs. We are human beings that have bodies. We are bodies, in fact. We need profits if we want to grow, and we need well-being, not just welfare. The role of the family in the economy is very important because for production, it produces the most basic needs: human capital and other resources. When one looks at who owns the wealth, who holds savings across the world, what we find very clearly is a tendency that shows, a trend that shows you that stable marriages are the ones who really hold the savings, the wealth, access to credit, etc. in the world. Who are the poor households? Are those who are mainly single mothers, followed by cohabiting or single fathers. So there's something about family structure that tells us that has to do with economics. Consumption, right? Exchange. Well, the cost of transactions increase a lot when there is no moral and social capital. And that is not small when it comes to potential for expansion in an economy. And the family has a lot to do with that. The family structure has a lot to do with that. And finally, appropriate distribution. And here's where I always love to say that women here has a key role. Women seems to be the best person to ensure appropriate distribution. Next. So why is the family important for sustainable economic development? Because it increases savings and wealth. Both are necessary for development because it affects investment. It reduces poverty. It increases access to credit and therefore increases social mobility. So if we don't have collateral, we don't have access to credit. We don't have access to credit, we don't have dynamism in a society. It is relevant for the production of human and social capital, which is extremely important for the sake of transaction cost, productivity, etc. And finally, there is one more element that is important to keep in mind. The broken families increase public financial burden in the United States and around the world. And independently of whether it is a social market economy, a market economy, or something in between. Next page. Now, to achieve sustainable development, what today the economists know, can we please click further, all the way, is that we need to understand, can we continue, please? Thank you. So what we know now in economics, and this is what we are wrestling as economists in our research today, is that the economic agent as a self-utility maximizer is the wrong approach. Does not correspond to reality. And what I would like to suggest is that the reason why this is the case is, and it has to do a lot with the family, is because the economic agent has an interpersonal dimension, maximizes intertemporally and as a social person, and it has antemporality condition. And when we think in these three characteristics, we can understand why the structure of the family has come to be extremely important for a sustainable economic development. And that's why focusing on the family is the right thing to do for any economy. So we want healthy families where they can actively contribute to the economy. Next slide. I would like you to observe these pictures for a minute. And here is the threat, I would say, one of the biggest threats that we have coming in the next generation, next decades. We already have them today. What you have on the top are the utilization of artificial intelligence, robotics, etc., to take care of children on the top, to take care of dogs in the bottom. Does it make a difference? And what does it look like? A child that is fed by a robot or cared by a robot while in a hospital. Can we make to the next? Here is the new advances of artificial intelligence. I don't know if you have children on the age of graduating, but my students now are being interviewed by robots. Taught reality, what they call reality, instead of by discussing in groups with artificial intelligence. And finally, human resources now is being trained also by virtual reality or artificial intelligence. So what does it mean for production in an economy when new employees are received by machines, treated by machines, when students are being taught not by discussion, by integration, by virtual reality? And what does it mean to have human resources of any, no one else in the world, but human resources being trained by machines? What does it mean to be human? And how does that affect, or what's the role of the family on all this? The next. What does it mean to face the world and its reality and oneself? What you see on the top are, we know who is the top right? How do we see ourselves? Who are we? The middle one is dealing with death. Now we have artificial intelligence who can, instead of letting go, because somebody has died, the bottom picture, keeps it alive by bringing it in virtual reality. And finally, how do we deal with interaction, human presence, right? Is it our avatars, or is it really a real meeting? Next page. So why does it matter? And what's the role of the family, and how is that will affect the economy in the future? Next page. So we need to decide, do we want to be human or not? Because from an economic point of view, it does make a difference. We know that the best conditions for a productive and sustainable economy is a stable household, and that's a mother and a father in a stable relationship. And from an economic point of view, this produces the best workers, this generates the assets required for growth, this generates the skills and the social conditions for sustainable development. Next page. What does it mean to interact as a family? What does it mean to take care of others? What does it mean to live for something? I think these pictures speak to themselves. So what are the threats and the opportunities for individual families and for governments who behooves them for the sake of their country to protect these basic institutions, as some of the previous speakers have mentioned? I think that is worth to think, to remember that from an economic point of view, this is not value neutral. And that the next challenge that we are facing is to decide how are we going to let the wonderful tool that technology brings us into the life of the household and therefore into the economy. And that it, once again, we have to consider that it's not value neutral. With this, I'm going to end up with an anecdote that I think it says a lot. This summer, I was with one of my grandnieces and nephews, and we were about to enter into a supermarket, and a lady came with a baby. So I said to my little grandnephew, Santiago, let's open the door to help the lady. Be a gentleman. And so he tried to open the door. Of course, he still was little, so he couldn't, but I helped him. He opened the door. And the lady coming in said, thank you very much. You are a real gentleman. And my nephew looked at me and he said, Sophia, I am not a gentleman. I'm a superhero, because superheroes can do more good than humans. I think this is a food for thought. And from an economics point of view, I can tell you that this event is extremely important because the household, the family is at the core of whether an economy can be sustainable or not. Thank you very much. And I don't know if you have any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Aguirre, for your presentation. Dear colleagues, we will now proceed with the dialogue between member states and presenters. Before proceeding, I respectfully remind the distinguished delegations of the provisions of Article 46 of the Rules of Procedure, which states, and I quote, statements by members of the Permanent Council and officials participating in its meetings shall in each case be limited to 5 minutes. The chair shall adopt the measures he or she considers advisable to comply with this provision, unquote. Thank you all for your cooperation as we move forward. Having said that, and with the permission of the delegations, I would like to offer the floor first to Ambassador Brandelli, Permanent Representative of Brazil, who will make a brief introduction before offering the floor to Ms. Angela Gandra Martins, National Secretary for Family Affairs of Brazil. Ambassador Brandelli, you have the floor, sir.
Muito obrigado, senhora presidente. Eu gostaria.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam Chairman, and I thank you very much indeed for having taken up Brazil, Colombia, Salvador, Guatemala, Haiti, and Venezuela's request to hold this special session of the Permanent Council of the OAS on such an important day, International Families Day. I'd like now to give the floor to the National Secretary for Families, who will speak on behalf of the Brazilian delegation at this time. Ms. Angela Gandra, National Secretary for Family Affairs of Brazil. Well, a very good morning to you all. Allow me to greet you, Ambassador Elizabeth and others, and to thank the ambassador here for everything he is doing for us, and to congratulate Colombia for having joined the consensus declaration. And I would like us to applaud that very good news from Colombia that we heard earlier. Now, let me very quickly set forth the public policies that we are putting in practice in Brazil with regard to the families. And we have learned a lot from others in the process. And if I can bring the PowerPoint up with someone's help, thank you very much indeed. That will guide us as I share. Next. This is the first time we have a Ministry of Women and Family in Brazil, and so we're learning as we go on. Let me tell you that our Constitution affirms that the family is the basis of society. And very often, as you know, public policies don't necessarily focus on what is in the Constitution. And we want to make sure that the family is the basis of society. We are establishing and reestablishing its autonomy and its importance in the overall structure. To strengthen that unit can only really happen if the child, which is at the root of the family, is also supported. Let me also say that when we participate in benchmarking, we understand that any public policy that involves the family is immensely more effective because it makes the family responsible for lowering public expenditure and thereby helps limit human suffering. Next. In 2020, our president signed the National Strategy for the Strengthening of Family Ties. That is the cornerstone of our policy. What we want is to improve the quality of family ties. This has become cross-cutting throughout the public administration at the federal level. We work with every single ministry to that end, to strengthen family ties via public policy. Call it education, family tourism, savings, the whole 9 yards, beginning, of course, with the federal government itself. Next. Our key programs are Strong Families. This is a program that aims to bring the family into more fluid communication in and among itself. Parents, children, etc. We want to focus on the dreams of children, the stresses on families, their friends, whatever affects the family, not to mention substances, some of them illegal, whether it's drugs or alcohol or others. And this is something we're carrying out throughout the municipalities and townships in Brazil. The idea, I say again, is to strengthen the actual family ties themselves. Next, we have the Reconnect project. This recognizes the impact of technology on families, especially the fact that technology often has led to silence in the family. Where did the family dinner conversation go? And so we aim to make sure that the content of technology serves knowledge, and not only of the academic kind, but also information to prevent suicide and to keep pornography out. We want to be sure that the eyes and the heart and the minds of children are well served. Next, we have a project that focuses on the family at school. Parents need to be present, need to track their behavior, their kids' behavior at the school, so that there isn't some kind of a gap or a yawning canyon between one and the other. We want to be sure that parents are also trained in terms of education. They also to understand certain pedagogical important issues like learning to spot the moods of your children and what they can mean, not to mention suicide and self-mutilation. I'm happy to say that because families are now more aware of the first symptoms of some suicidal ideation, parents can intervene in good time, can look for medical support, and we're very happy to say that numbers of tragedies have been averted by those means. Then we also have the National School of the Family, where parents can find material on what makes a good parent and other aspects that can assist them in fully playing their role and strengthening their family ties. Next. We also have a program that we consider of the greatest importance. It talks about the balance between the workplace and the family. We want to make sure that families are aware of this dichotomy, and we bring in the business sector because we know that companies can offer work and also, by that same token, strengthen the family. These are the great treasures of the country. We don't want one to erode the other. And so we are very much tracking companies that are family friendly and that can share whatever makes them so with other companies in Brazil. We want to spread the good word. Then, as the minister has already pointed out, we have the National Observatory on the Family. We want the families to be able to learn in terms of statistics, in terms of hard facts as to how the families are doing. These are the real thing. We have a publication that's called Facts and Numbers. This is the result of very finely tuned research so that people so interested can learn what the facts are about families in our country and also, frankly, about life in Brazil in general. We in Brazil are pro-life and we are pro-family, and we want to ensure that the statistics show that. There are also scholarships offered on family policies, both at the master's level and at the doctorate level, if people want to go back to learn some more, go back to college. And now we're close to the end. You have a program that rewards municipalities that have put the family in pride of place, that have set up a secretariat, a municipal secretariat on the family. And by the way, this is really taking off in Brazil. Very well received. We are also sharing our public policies in the family with others. Partnership for Families says what it says. And this we have shared with the UN, while at the same time, we want to strengthen the voice of the family in international organizations. We already talked about the Consensual Declaration of Geneva that is based on 4 pillars that are rooted in human rights: strengthening of family ties, the right to life, the complete health of women and the projection of women through her work, and the rule of law, democracy, and the sovereignty of every country to decide as to which public policies in these areas it wishes to follow. We are also moving toward increased family balance. We want to be much more attentive to the needs of the family, especially in this post-pandemic era, as regards the eradication of poverty and increased support from the social and family standpoint, social and economic. One last point is that we are awaiting this very month in Brazil a course that is going to be launched that is entitled Marriage is Legal. But that, in the Brazilian phrase, is marriage is a good thing, illegal. Marriage is cool. And so we have this in Article 1625 of our Constitution, the fact that men and women are equal at home, and we want to be very sure that that equal standing exists in the home as in society, because that is our law. So thanks very much for the opportunity to share with you. And needless to say, we would be delighted to share more on our public policy, while at the same time, of course, urging you all to come join us. Come join the consensus declaration in Geneva. Thanks very much.
The floor is now open for participation by member states. El Salvador, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good morning. I'd like to offer apologies from the First Lady of El Salvador. She had expressed her interest in sharing our country's experiences at this meeting. Unfortunately, due to force majeure, she wasn't able to be here. Chair, we thank delegations of Brazil, Ecuador, Guatemala, Haiti, Venezuela, for the purpose of celebrating the International Day of Families, celebrated each year on May 15th. We would like to welcome Minister Rodriguez Brito of Brazil, Ms. Carmina Londoño, representatives of Bajo, Catholic University, and also the IACHR. The family plays a key role in society. This is recognized in different instruments, resolutions of the UN, and most constitutions of most countries. It is, as a social unit, it has been hit hard by the COVID-19 pandemic, and states have developed comprehensive policies to address this problem. In keeping with this, we appreciate this venue to be able to share experiences which are part of our national strategy, which puts at the center our families and which transcends sectors. And so we want to promote the partnership of families and the government in order to have families with healthy children from the time they're born until they are 8 years old. In 2019, our president announced that he was creating an early childhood program that promotes a multidimensional perspective on development and shared responsibility of everyone for early childhood. This takes into consideration that families and other primary caretakers, those who can best provide the affection that children need to develop. In the framework thereof, we approved a law which was promoted by our First Lady, which regulates health care provided to women and their children before pregnancy, during pregnancy, and after pregnancy so that they can be successful. We also have the program Grow Up Together. This involves government, private sector, NGOs, and all Salvadorians. And the goal for everyone is to improve the quality of life of our children. This is a comprehensive and intersectoral tool which promotes development of children from the womb until they are 8. We hope to be able to prioritize children with disabilities, as well as those from indigenous communities, rural areas, and impoverished families, which have been hit much harder by the COVID-19 pandemic. Chair, El Salvador recognizes the co-responsibility of the state, families, and society to implement specific measures to promote their rights and their comprehensive development. We believe that if we have high-quality services For our smallest members of society, we can promote our families and thereby the future of our country. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair. Mexico thanks the delegations that requested this special session to promote the importance of the issues related to families. And to say families, plural, is important to show families in all their diversity, and we appreciate that. Since 1993, when the General Assembly of the UN decided to celebrate International Day of Families, there has been an emphasis on the fact that families are the natural basis of our societies. We recognize this, and that families have changed within the context of our cultures and our societies. And all families must receive inclusive support from the government. Families are where we have human development. All families with one parent, or families that are made up of different members, families that have parents missing because they migrated, or families without children. All families, without an exception, deserve to be recognized and to have appropriate public policies for them. The crisis of COVID-19 highlighted the global vulnerabilities that exist in our economic and social systems. The resilience of the post-COVID world will only be possible when everyone can realize their full potential based on their needs and diversity. Families in their diversity must be strengthened and protected to be able to provide their members with what they need and to be solid parts of our social cohesion. And this will bring about more justice and equality. The United Nations this year proposed the topic of families and urbanization, and the links that this has to SDGs on poverty eradication, good health, cities and settlements that are inclusive and safe, and the reduction of inequalities. Mexico is happy to celebrate this May 15th from a diverse family perspective. We believe that all children and young people, adults, disabled people, elderly people, Afro-descendants, indigenous peoples, LGBTI persons, vulnerable groups, or groups that have been marginalized, all of these people who are in families must be recognized, must be included, must be protected. We also need a gender, intersectional, and intercultural perspective to have cross-cutting legislation, services, and public policies. During the health crisis, women had to take on even more responsibilities and burden. In Mexico, women do 63% of caretaking. This is an important part of our GDP, but these women are not paid. On top of it, many women and more women suffered from gender violence. We see women who are very affected when they live in overcrowded circumstances. Thereby, our policies must have an intersectional perspective in order to help women who live in very extreme circumstances. This way, can bring about change that we need so that equality is a value for all families and that women and girls have the right to live without violence. The policy or well-being policy in Mexico that is being implemented focuses on the fact that all members of the family have rights and duties. Mexico is investing in public policies to eradicate poverty, inequality, and hunger so that everyone can be equal through the protection of families. In urban areas that are very poor, these policies are aimed at providing what families need. Chair, the intervention of Soledad Garcia Munoz has clearly shown the challenges with respect to recognizing diverse families so that they can have a dignified life, so that their rights can be protected and recognized, especially their sexual and reproductive rights, which are often violated. The intersectional approach allows us to see women who live in urban areas must have new public policies that address the challenges they face. This to ensure well-being of families, especially families that are headed up by just one parent. Same-sex families also need special protection. Their human rights need to be also protected. States must have public policies that protect all people and all families so that we can have sustainable societies. Thank you very much, Chair.
St. Lucia, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. My delegation expresses appreciation to the delegations that presented this important item for our discussion today. We also express gratitude to the distinguished panel for their insightful, informative, and thought-provoking presentations. St. Lucia joins the rest of the world in observing International Day of Families, commemorated each year on May 15th. The theme for this year, Families and Urbanization, presents a unique opportunity for us to reflect on family-oriented policies aimed at the attainment of the Sustainable Development Goals, particularly SDGs 1, 3, 10, and 11. Families play a vital role in the growth and development of our children, our future generation. The future we wish for our economies depend on the foundation set by our families, where children are nurtured and prepared to bring meaningful changes to our societies. In keeping with the objective of this special meeting of the Permanent Council, which is to exchange national experiences in terms of promoting the well-being and resilience of families through public policies and other mechanisms, my delegation wishes to share a few of the initiatives of the government of St. Lucia in undertaking the government of St. Lucia is undertaking in this effort. Since taking up office in July 2021, the Philip J. Pierre administration has had a policy of putting people first. During his presentation of the 2022-2023 budget policy statement, under the theme Empowering Our People, Transforming Our Economy, Prime Minister Pierre emphasized the important role of the family in building the social fabric of our society, and thus outlined an agenda that addresses all elements of the family, the youth, workers, the elderly, as well as the diaspora. Policies are focused on addressing the inadequate social support which has undermined the value of the family, thus leading to many social ills, including an escalation of criminal activity. The creation of a youth economy aims to transform hobbies into entrepreneurship and skills into businesses by providing committed young people with finance, training, mentorship, and marketing support. The government also believes that every household in St. Lucia should have at least one university graduate and will therefore be providing tax relief to businesses that assist employees pursuing education courses, and will continue improvements in online learning with a focus on tertiary education. The government is also embarking on providing affordable access to the global digital infrastructure, thus allowing for the sharing of knowledge and access to new business opportunities. This is particularly important for rural families and communities where access is limited. A review of related provisions of the Labor Act to ensure that employers provide living wages to employers, thus encouraging workers and their families to live in dignity. Chair, the government of St. Lucia is currently implementing a house repair program aimed initially at the elderly, differently abled, and low-income households. Low-income households will also be provided with residential lots in the south of the country, which is a rural area. Efforts have commenced to review and update the national policy for older persons of St. Lucia, first developed in 2003 and revised in 2013. The policy will ensure that the requirements for healthy aging are addressed and that older persons live in dignity and with security, free from exploitation and physical or mental abuse, and treated with care regardless of age, gender, or socioeconomic status. The role of the diaspora cannot be excluded from a discussion on family policies. The contribution of the diaspora to the economic development of St. Lucia, especially through remittances and other support to their families and communities at home, must be recognized. To this end, the government of St. Lucia intends to fully engage the diaspora in the country's development processes and the creation of opportunities and wealth for its people. Madam Chair, these are just a few of the many policies being implemented by the government of St. Lucia aimed at strengthening, promoting, and protecting families. I thank you.
Thank you, St. Lucia. Guatemala, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Guatemala thanks Brazil for having convened this or requested the convening of this special meeting. And Guatemala is honored to also have supported this request in order to draw attention to the important issue of families on this commemoration of the International Day of Families. And we are so happy that on May 15th of every year, we celebrate this day. We would like to thank Minister Rodriguez Brito, Minister of Women, Family, and Human Rights, and Ms. Angela Gandra, the National Secretary on Family. We also thank Ms. Maria Londoño, the Vice Minister of Colombia, Ms. Soledad Garcia Muñoz, the Special Rapporteur of the IACHR, Dr. Sonja Cafe from Pajo, and Dr. Maria Sofia Aguirre from Catholic University. We thank them for their presentations. Chair, as Article 17 of the American Convention recognizes, the family is the natural basis of society, and it must be protected by the state and by society. It affirms that the family is the natural basis from which society is born. This means that the integral development of people is the integral development of our society. The United Nations, as mentioned before, has selected as the theme for today families and urbanization in order to make people aware of the importance of sustainable urban policies for families. Along these lines, the report of the Secretary General for 2022 has pointed out that COVID-19 started out as a health crisis, but it has then affected health, education, and other sectors of life. which has also had an effect on caregiving as well as work and families. Due to this situation, families face new challenges in order to meet the economic needs and the caregiving needs of their members. And thus, it is of vital importance to invest in families. These are a social network and provide care in order to address the negative effects of the pandemic, to strengthen resilience of caregivers and children, in order to be able to recover after the crisis. The Constitution of Guatemala recognizes the family as the building block of the spiritual and moral values of society. Article 47 thereof states that the government must ensure economic and social protection of families. And this is based on equality of human rights of everyone, the right of people to freely decide how many children they have and when. The government of our president has established a policy to protect life and family as an institution. This is a program that is systemic in order to address the problem with respect to the protection of life from the moment of conception. The main interventions to be able to implement the policy will be done through a network to protect life and the family unit. And this consists of interagency measures which ensure integral development to families, guaranteeing the right to life, right to health, also the right to food, clean water, employment, and training in order to have a better life for Guatemalans. This is based on the protection of life, this both before birth and during early childhood, during childhood, protection of life and the institution of family with respect to youth, and protection of life and the institutionality of families when people are adults and older. Now, in keeping with this public policy, Guatemala signed on to the Consensual Declaration of Geneva in order to promote women's rights nationally and internationally, and reiterating Guatemala's commitment with respect to the American Convention on Human Rights as far as the right to life is concerned. In February 2021, the Congress of Guatemala approved Decree 922, in which it declared 9th of March the Day for Life and the Family. The decree provides for different celebrations as well as awareness campaigns for Guatemala to promote nonviolence in families and to promote the family unit. Guatemala has also been promoting the family as the natural building block of society. It also issued a declaration on the rights of the family and the rights of women. This includes issues that are very important, equal opportunities for women, among others. Together with other member states, it also signed on to the resolution with respect to the promotion and protection of rights of the family. And this has to do with caregiving for children and adolescents so that they can get protection in order to realize their full potential in their families. To conclude, Chair, my country appeals to everyone that we follow through on our commitments on an international level, respect to the families. To invest in families is to invest in individuals and thus the future of our countries. This is everyone's duty. Thank you.
I would like to remind member states that we should stick within the 5-minute time frame. Thank you. Bolivia, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair. First of all, I want to thank the Mission of Brazil and the other missions that requested that this special meeting be convened to commemorate the International Day of Families, which is to be celebrated on May 15th, which was determined by the UN General Assembly in order to promote families, the building block of societies. And Bolivia, as of 2013, has included this as a national holiday. I would like to honor all families in all their diversity as the unit that is the building block of society. Families have suffered from the crisis of the pandemic, and that these could be long-term, these effects on families. Based on our Constitution, which was the first constitution that was approved in a referendum, we included the family unit as the building block of society, and we recognize the fundamental values of equality, diversity, tolerance, and inclusion, among others. Thereafter, in 2014, we had a law enacted with respect to families, and I had the honor of actually participating in writing this law. This was a pioneer law in Latin America. It substituted an obsolete law from the 1970s. This has an integral perspective on families, respecting their diversity, and also promoting their cultural, economic, and other types of development. It recognizes many different families, not just the traditional family structure. It ensures the rights and duties of all members of the family, and it protects the most vulnerable of those families. This is procedural and substantive law, and it established immediate processes, and also family courts were including new kinds of procedures and processes therein. This included the recognition of children to live with their families, and these public policies went along with this, and this helped to promote more adoptions in Bolivian society. All of these measures have helped our society. These are public policies that are focusing on families' well-being. And this is what we need to work on, first of all, in our countries. But it is a task that we need to work on regionally. The rights of our families, migrant families, for example, repatriation thereof and protection of their rights is something that we must look at in a cross-cutting way. And we must have a human rights perspective on this. COVID-19, Chair, has shown the weaknesses of our states and of our health systems. But it particularly has revealed that in difficult moments, the rights that are most jeopardized and endangered are the rights of those who are most vulnerable in societies: children, women, and the elderly. Therefore, our systems and countries must take decisive, immediate action to protect these vulnerable peoples. To conclude, Chair, I want to pay homage to all families who, because of COVID-19, have lost a loved one. COVID-19 was a before and an after in our recent history, and it has made us learn very difficult lessons, but those lessons must also include lessons of love for our brothers and sisters. Thank you very much.
Merci Madame la Présidente. Permettez-moi de saluer la ministre brésilienne de la Femme, de la Famille et des Droits de la Personne, Madame Cristiane Brito, la vice-ministre des Affaires multilatérales du ministère des Relations extérieures de la Colombie, Madame Maria.
I wanted to thank Minister Brito, Vice Minister Londoño, and all the others who are here with us celebrating the International Day of Families. The UN General Assembly, in its resolution of September 1993, talked about the importance of the family. The family is the center of society's enrichment, and it is the one that allows for our society to evolve. And it engenders human capital. It is the building block of all societies. This day invites us to think about the needs and challenges that families face, and as a result, the way we need to take measures to address COVID-19. These challenges, these problems and needs are more evident than ever. And we have seen these challenges worsen because of the loss of employment in vulnerable families. Chair, because of our history, our families live in community. They are based on an idea of sharing. We have cousins that are considered brothers and sisters. They are part of the family. And so we have very close family ties. And they are also tied to their community, to their land. Families have these communal lands. And so that explains the basis of our society. And so indispensable people who are members of the family are the relatives. Even neighbors are considered part of the family. And children are everyone's children. And so solidarity is a value that we all share, whether you are the biological parents or not. Chair, despite the UN Convention that was adopted by the General Assembly on the rights of children still suffer the violation of their rights. The Haitian Constitution from 1997 places children at the heart of the family and assigns them special protection. Now, under the Convention of the Right of the Child, Haiti has taken on the commitment to adopt in its legislation all measures necessary to ensure children's rights. And my government has taken budgetary measures and other measures in order to promote the rights of the child, to protect the child, and to protect them from, for example, illegal international adoption or trafficking of persons, and to make sure that the families are protected. It is also an issue of having a social security plan and a plan for families to have subsidies if they are vulnerable. We have a unit for social protection, and they try to make the population aware of the importance of the rights of the child. The peace which we aspire to in our countries must begin with our families. The inequalities that we are fighting in our region must also be fought in our families. When we have families where there is justice and equality, then our societies reflect that. And so families guarantee our well-being and welfare. Thank you.
Paraguay, you have the floor.
Señora Presidenta.
Madam Chairman, the delegation of Paraguay is most grateful for the convening of this special session of the Permanent Council in order to highlight and commemorate the International Day of Families. The theme that has been proposed to us for further reflection has been very usefully taken up by the panelists, given the decision that was taken way back in 93 by the UN General Assembly to celebrate International Families Day on May 15th. And I dare say the reasons for that decision remain as timely today as they were then. The family, we all know it, is a major agent of social development, and without the family, that process is hollow. The Republic of Paraguay has in its own framework enshrined the family and our convention as the family, as the basic element of society, and its integral protection shall be safeguarded. So too the needs of the family as being those of the country itself. The welfare, the resilience of families through public policy and numbers of other mechanisms have been the means by which, as in one of the famous laws that we adopted recently on the promotion and protection of children and adolescents to live in a family, is also joined by the efforts we have made to ensure that members of the family who are vulnerable should also be cared for. We have programs such as Atuvo, which in the Guarani language means assistance or help. So we take a very whole look at the family, and we celebrate its existence among us every year. This is a wonderful opportunity to put our heads together and learn from each other. Various state practices that have been shared, I think we would all do well to emulate. Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Greetings to everybody, and special greetings to Madam Minister of Women, Human Rights, and the Family, Commissioner Brito, who is with us today. COSARI recognizes Brazil, Colombia, Ecuador, El Salvador, Guatemala, Haiti, and Venezuela for having launched this initiative, a very good one indeed, that brings us together here to celebrate women and the family at large as the essence of society. Everything we have heard, we believe, is very, very enriching. And as we commemorate, as we have done since 1993, the International Day of Families, it has to be recognized that in various different social, economic, social, and political constructs, families mean different things. The American Convention on Human Rights recognizes this, and the court itself, in numbers of its consultative opinions, recognizes the diversity of families. The protection of families and family life doesn't just fall from above. It requires time, resources, and attention for its integral, its comprehensive involvement in our society. Now, COVID-19 has, of course, shed a very sharp light on what families do. The family as an inclusive and cooperative element in terms of education, health, inclusion, security, safety, welfare, and numbers of others is without question the family that protects our children, that protects the youngest among us, that protects those who are differently abled, those who are older and elderly and vulnerable perhaps, falls to the family first and last. And our particular structure ensures that the territorial and urban design of cities and communities aim to be inclusive, safe, and resilient. We want these to contribute to minimize inequality and not the contrary. So when we speak of equality, participation on an equal footing at the job, and, let us say it, an equal distribution, a fair-handed distribution of tasks at home, is something that we take very seriously. We also have, for 2018-2030, a plan of action on urban development. And there we showcase the needs of families. Let me underscore 3 of its aspects. Number 1, the link between urban development and health. There need to be accessible and safe green spaces in the urban development so that people have a place to go, to walk, to run, to rest, to develop good habits that will not only improve their physical well-being, but probably also develop non-communicable diseases that will harm them and society. And that, as we know, are one of the main sources of mortality. So for the state and for the families that have to deal with this, aside from the fact that the quality of life of everybody is effective, all of this makes good sense. So green spaces, recreation. Secondly, so social and community development must also have their room in our urban development. Talking about civic centers, and we call them Centros Cívicos por la Paz, civic centers for peace. Why is that? Because we think that civic centers where music, art, dancing, sports, and numbers of other activities are offered, very often in international cooperation, we are sowing safety. We want to get people away from gangs and give them something else to do. Then we also are looking at the actual urban development in terms of the housing, protection, water supply, lighting. All of this is critical in the zoning that is included in urban plans. Now, we've come some way down that road. In fact, Costa Rican law has been certainly focused on the many who are the heads of families, mothers, grandmothers, aunts, uncles, you name it. This is called the extended family. And the extended family reflects the complexity of the family, probably from day one. In OC 24, which I have cited here, the consultative opinion of the court, we follow that. Also respecting families that are of the same sex and recognize their equal footing in every respect. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Chile thinks that the holding of this special session is a very good thing indeed. And we thank all those who asked for this session to be held. We also take note of the very illuminating statements of the panelists and the various others who have spoken since then. Families in their diverse array is something that we understand or do not develop in an isolated, haphazard way. We need to understand why the Ministry for childhood and the program Chile is Growing With You, which focuses on children, states as one of its special missions the steps that need to be taken to backstop and to protect boys and girls in every phase of their development, not least when they find themselves in a position of vulnerability. Between 2022 and 2026, we have decided to work on a psychosocial protection to be offered for children that will be rooted in various policies that will aim for the integral respect for the rights of children. And we broaden the policy Chile Crece Contigo, Chile Grows With You, and focus also on the transitioning of programs that go from a very individual focus to a more community focus. There are various groups that are prioritized here: boys, girls, and adolescents, that's 1. 2, elderly with or without dependencies. 3, persons with handicap. And 4, caretakers. And we hope that in these years we can do something really meaningful for all of these groups, not least the caregivers. Madam Chair, this is a banner day, and it's important that we each look at what our societies have done in that regard. Here, we want to point to the law on diverse families, and that covers all aspects of family life. Now, this didn't come easily. We remember the case Anala and Garcia Munoz, which pointed out that the Inter-American Convention on Human Rights protects diverse families, particularly those involving LGBTI persons. Let me, in closing, reiterate the firm and unwavering commitment of Chile to stand by these principles. Thank you. Thank you. We're delighted that this session was convened and very pleased to have listened to all who have spoken. Now, let's face it, our societies have evolved enormously in many of these respects over the last 20, 30 years, and we are we not, facing a very different picture from the one that we faced some years ago. As we consider the broad meaning of the word las familias, with an S in both cases in Spanish to signify the plural, families in the plural, we have to take into account what one day we considered as an anomaly, something to be avoided, and today we recognize to be very much part and parcel of who we are and the development of our societies. This is rooted in our understanding of rights and diverse rights that have evolved in Argentina as elsewhere, and that we have sought to enshrine in the public policies that we have offered, tackling so many sources of violence: gender violence, violence in situations of persons in the greatest vulnerable context. But let me say, it is in this plurality that I'm addressing quite a challenge, let me put it bluntly, quite a challenge to recognize the plurality on the one hand, while we continue to focus on the indivisible nature of the family nucleus. And what is at that nucleus? It is love. It is commitment. It is solidarity. It's education. It is our love for our homeland. It is it not, a recognition of what our children stand for, who they are, what they mean to us. And so that unifying and indivisible aspect of the family must be recognized as well. along with the diversity. Now, here's the thing. All that is not enough. We need to be sure that our kids are well taught, they have a school to go to, that they have 4 meals a day, and have some of them at home. So that means that the family must also be buttressed and worked on by the fathers and the mothers. And last but not least, you need a roof over your head. And so what we are describing here in this very, very stirring meeting and challenging and thought-provoking meeting is that it isn't a one-size-fits-all. You know, we talk about all of this, but at the same time, when it gets down to it, we so often fall back on the tired old policies that are threadbare, that keep us from moving forward and truly tapping the strategic wealth that we have. And I speak of this in the broadest possible terms, even in the level of our economy. Very often we fall into the hands of the great corporations, big money, and at the end of the day, that trickles down, and not in a good way, to the family. And so when we don't pay attention to how those big policies trickle down and affect the so-called smaller ones, we end up jeopardizing these. We jeopardize our families. We need greater inclusion, policies that will foster that. And this is what I believe will strengthen the families of the Americas. Thank you. A very good morning, Madam Chair. It's always a pleasure to see you chairing the meeting, and dear colleagues, I join you in celebrating this International Families Day, which focuses today on families and urbanization. Let me applaud each of the panelists that have shed such light this day by their comments. This issue is of enormous pertinence for Canada. You know, we are the 12th largest country in the world. Our population is very urbanized. 82% of Canadians live in an urban area. From 2016 to 2021, that share continued to climb, and it is due in no small measure on the arrival of migrants, which has increased by 90% in flowing to the large urban centers. We understand that this will mean important environmental impact, and it requires of us a response in services, and transportation is not the least among them. The growth in great urban centers in Canada must be understood also, along with the great stresses placed on the family in price, the price of food, the price of gas, the price of roof over one's head, whether it's rent, whether it's procuring a home. And so we have looked at the role of the family in the midst of our economic plan. And I'm going to shift to English at this time, Madam Chair.
Poverty reduction strategy in 2018 and has taken actions to tackle poverty to make Canadians' lives more affordable, things such as the Canada Child Benefit, the Canada Workers Benefit, a national housing strategy as well. In addition, for families with young children, there's a Canada-wide early learning and childcare system in collaboration with provincial, territorial, and Indigenous partners. An investment of over $21 billion over 5 years to increase access to high-quality, affordable, flexible, and inclusive childcare, giving our children the best start in life and enabling parents to work, creating a solid economic foundation for families across the country. As we develop and implement these programs, Canada is committed to ensuring that they reflect and respond to all families in all the diverse and various forms, with children and without, no matter where they live, in cities, in rural, or in remote locations. This commitment to diversity and intersectionality requires us to be open, to be nimble, and to be innovative. And I want to give an example. Just last month, Canada became the first country to collect and publish data on gender diversity from a national census. From the 2021 census, we learned that 1 in 300 people in Canada aged 15 and older is transgender or non-binary, and that the vast majority of these individuals live in urban settings. Although the full picture of gender diversity related to families, to households, and marital status is not expected until July, this type of data can assist policymakers in developing inclusive urban planning and allocating dedicated resources to community and health services, to public facilities, and other measures as well. This morning, I'd like to thank in particular Ms. Garcia and Dr. Cafe, who also were on the panel today, for speaking about the importance of recognizing the diversity of and diversity in our families as a source of strength. In closing, without question, families provide essential support to our societies. But it's also true that our societies must provide commensurate support to families in all their diversity. Only then can we realize our full potential. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ambassador. Peru, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. The delegation of Peru is very pleased to be here, and we thank the delegations who pushed forward on this excellent initiative, putting it on our agenda today, and have been very happy to hear every statement. Peru shares the concerns that have been highlighted, including particularly the fact that post-COVID-19, this question of the family is ever more important, if that were even possible. We reflect this in our government through policies that promote programs and projects that are family-oriented, the development of children, particularly without parental support, and everything that leads to development on an equal footing, on equality, the elderly, the promotion of equal rights from the standpoint of gender equality as well, and the right of everyone to live in a family. We also want to monitor the establishment of policies and national plans, the reinsertion of children in their homes, and parental rights. The Ministry for Women has a project which is ready to go on the national system of care in order to aspire to a more equitable distribution of responsibility in terms of that care. That's it. Thank you very much.
Mr. Tarry, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to begin by thanking the Permanent Mission of Brazil for having requested this meeting of the Permanent Council, which was supported by our delegation as well as other member states. We'd also like to thank the contributions made by our distinguished panelists, which have enriched our debate. We wanted to avail ourselves of this occasion when we are highlighting the family as a basic unit of society to reiterate the commitment of the administration of Juan Guaido with the family based on our Constitution. The family is what was most affected by the pandemic, which led to a crisis. And this added to the crisis that Venezuela was already suffering, increased mortality of women and children, the destruction of the health and education system, and the separation of Venezuelan families who have had to leave and look for better opportunities. We want to express our solidarity to those who have been killed due to political reasons or jailed for political reasons under the administration of Maduro. We need to protect the family to progress. Parents give their values, share their values with children within the family. And this leads to a solid society, and thus we need to protect the family and create conditions for social mobility. We celebrate the family, and we also hope that in Venezuela also families may prosper to be able to ensure the future of our country. Thank you, Chair.
Madam Chair, Ecuador is having problem to connect.
Okay, in the meantime, we will give the floor to Trinidad and Tobago. Ecuador, we will come back to you. Trinidad, you have the floor.
Chair, Excellencies, Permanent and Interim Representatives, Secretary General, Honorable Ministers and other expert presenters, distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. On behalf of the government and people of Trinidad and Tobago, this delegation extends greetings on the upcoming observance of the International Day of Families 2022, and our appreciation to the Chair of the Permanent Council and to the requesting delegations for the convening of this special meeting to commemorate the International Day of Families. This delegation is also grateful to our distinguished presenters for the insightful and informative experiences and perspectives which they have shared. Chair, Excellencies, and distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, the importance and indispensability of the role of families in the attainment of sustainable development is explicitly stated in Trinidad and Tobago's Vision 2030, our National Development Strategy 2016 to 2030, which is entitled Many Hearts, Many Voices, One Vision. In the post-COVID-19 context of our pursuit of sustainable development, the 2022 theme for the International Day of Families and Urbanization is therefore very timely. The first and principal theme of our National Development Strategy is putting people first, nurturing our greatest asset. It is therefore no surprise, Madam Chair, that a specific goal of that first and principal theme in our National Development Strategy mandates that the family will be protected and supported. Chair, in Trinidad and Tobago, it is established national public policy that as the most immediate and basic social institution, it is paramount that the family unit be restored as the primary agent of socialization. In our country, even before its arrival, and even more so since the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, the protection of the family has therefore become essential in light of rising family challenges such as domestic violence, teenage pregnancy, child abuse, and gang-related activity. Special emphasis is also placed in Trinidad and Tobago on providing support for single-headed households. Further, in protecting and delivering support to families of multifaceted and multidisciplinary approaches utilized, involving greater cooperation and coordination among those agencies that tackle these issues. This combined approach involves key stakeholders such as public sector agencies, civil society organizations, and religious bodies. New and existing programs are continually geared towards educating and promoting caring, tolerance, problem solving, and other essential skills required for the development of stable family structures. One specific initiative aims to encourage family development. Through this initiative, new innovative programs are developed towards supporting the family, preventing family instability, and facilitating rehabilitation and restoration where needed. These new programs have augmented existing measures that already assist families. They include encouraging the public and private sector in collaboration with employees to develop family-friendly workplace policies, such as the provision of daycare services to parents, particularly single parents. Measures also entail encouraging the media to place greater emphasis on promoting and disseminating positive values and information on the family. Further, civil society, including religious bodies, are also encouraged to provide greater support to families through psychosocial interventions. Other specific initiatives for protecting and supporting families in Trinidad and Tobago are focused on protecting our children and the elderly and rehabilitating, integrating, and reintegrating vulnerable groups. The delegation of Trinidad and Tobago is therefore pleased to be able to join in this commemoration of the International Day of Families 2022. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ambassador. We now give the floor to Ecuador. At this point, we will go to the observers. Ecuador, we will refer to you if you are able to.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to thank Brazil, Colombia, El Salvador, Ecuador, Guatemala, Haiti, and Venezuela for having requested this meeting to commemorate the International Day of Families. The pandemic and the crisis it brought about has shown the important role of the families, which has been hard hit in many societies. Solidarity, caregiving, education in families have been decisive for physical and mental health of all. And so it is inadmissible that we have had an increase in domestic violence against women and girls. This has also made it worse because we have unemployment, lack of education, and few jobs for women. Families play a key role in development, and so family policies are essential so that we can actually realize the SDGs, such as poverty eradication, and also to have development that is respectful of nature. Families are the basic unit of society, and they are a place of personal development and protection. However, unfortunately, that is not always the case. Cultural factors sometimes, but above all, poverty, addiction, violence, isolation, make families vulnerable, and so they cannot protect their members and allow them to realize themselves. So we have supported international policies to fight against discrimination, support families. We are very much worried about women who work so hard without remuneration, without recognition. And so this is a priority to be able to look at this. And last year with Mexico, we looked at this. We also actively are working for the respect of the disabled, youth, and the elderly. We are supporters of international instruments to protect children, such as the Convention on the Rights of Child, and also other conventions. Every year, France and the European Union, as well as Latin America and the Caribbean, we present a resolution to the UN General Assembly before the Human Rights Council to protect children's rights based on current challenges, for example, the internet. We want to better protect adolescents, girls, against all violence. That is a part of family rights that we are referring to today. Thank you very much, Chair.
Floor to Spain.
Thank you, Chair. Based on the commemoration of International Day of Families, Spain wanted to share its voice here before May 15 to recognize the main role that diverse families play and in the social cohesion and welfare of our societies, and the need to protect them economically and with other laws. The government of Spain is committed to families, to diverse families, especially those most vulnerable, in order to address the challenges in a quickly changing world that is suffering an economic and social and health crisis without precedents. The celebration of May 15 is an occasion to expressly recognize the diversity of families, which is a sign of progress and modernity, recognizing the commitment to have legislation that responds and protects the different kinds of structures of families, which ensures different families that people elect freely. The effects of this crisis are showing the inequality that exists through the different gaps that persist and which have been made worse during the pandemic crisis. Economic and social gaps, which could be digital or gender-based, which demand a response, which must especially be true with respect to those who are most vulnerable. Families have shown that they are strong, that they can provide emotional, social, and economic support to their members, but it has also shown their weaknesses and their challenges. Within families, mostly it is women who take care of children who are not going to school, while they continue with their workplace responsibilities and also must take care of other dependents, such as the elderly. We make an appeal to have stronger social protection networks, to be able to protect those hardest hit because they have lost their home, because they have to take care of so many members, or they can't meet their basic needs because they have no income. We need to mobilize exceptional resources. We need to also support families better as a whole. We also need to prioritize those families that need specific support because they are vulnerable, because they have socioeconomic difficulties, because they may be excluded, or because of structural reasons. Maybe they're single-headed families, maybe they have many children, or it could be same-sex couple, because of different circumstances that come together, such as health problems with disability. And also we have sometimes gender discrimination. We are seeing the social and economic effects of the pandemic. These will go beyond the health crisis. Thus, we must have appropriate measures that respond to the magnitude of the problem socially and economically. We must fight against gender exclusion. We must deal with the caregiving issue as far as children, disabled people, and the elderly are concerned. This calls upon us to have a joint effort. Administrations, socioeconomic agents, we must all move forward decisively in order to achieve the SDGs of the 2030 Agenda, especially those that have to do with poverty, good health and well-being, and reduction of inequality. Finally, I want to remember all families who lost loved ones during the crisis.
Issue has been resolved. You have the floor.
The Minister of Women, Family and Human Rights of Brazil, Cristian Rodrigues Brito, here present today, and all the panelists, esteemed colleagues. The delegation of the Holy See welcomes the convening of this extraordinary session of the Permanent Council to commemorate the International Day of Families. In 1994, the United Nations General Assembly proclaimed May 15 an official day to highlight the value of the family, which is the central nucleus of society. Pope Francis has dedicated the apostolic exhortation Amoris Laetitia, the joy of love, to the family, showing the beauty and depth of this institution and its relational capacity, as well as the challenges it is going through, which has been increased by the scourge of the COVID-19 pandemic. Speaking recently to the participants of the plenary of the Pontifical Academy of Social Sciences, he urged them to rediscover the value of the family as the source and origin of the social order, as a vital cell of a fraternal society capable of caring of the common home. The family is therefore the place where one learns to relate to others, this being the basis of society. The family cannot be understood as a simple aggregation of individuals, but is founded on a relation bound of perfection, open in solidarity towards vulnerable people such as sick, the disabled, the unborn, and the elderly. The family is also the main antidote to poverty. It is the place where one first learns their responsibility to their community and where the heritage and culture of a nation is transmitted between generations. This solidarity amongst and between generations is the primary source for responding to social and economic needs in the family and among the community. Therefore, a society which supports and welcomes life is critical for supporting families in need, because, as Pope Francis reminds us, a society that does not welcome life stops living. Madam President, the Holy See follows very closely the institution of the family because in the fruitfulness of the human couple is a living and effective image, a visible sign of the creative act. From the union of a man and a woman, life is generated, being the natural and fundamental group unit of society, as affirmed by international law in Article 16 of the Universal Declaration on Human Rights. In turn, it is entitled to protection by society and the state, as sustained the Article 17 of the American Convention on Human Rights. Therefore, the Holy See recognizes the intervening role of states before the family, which does not supplant or eliminate its role, but helps it with initiative, laws, and resources for strengthening and in overcoming the challenges of the present time. That said, the Holy See encourages the promotion in this hemisphere of valid family-friendly social, economic, and cultural policies. For example, policies that harmonize family and work, fiscal policies that recognize family burdens and support the educational function of families, families that welcome life and the health of the new generations. To collaborate in solidity of the family is to recognize that society is born and evolve with the family. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you very much. We will move on. It's unfortunate that Ecuador you could not get on, but we invite you to submit your written comments to the Secretariat, and it will be reflected in the minutes of this meeting. Colleagues, we have concluded consideration of the agenda for this meeting. Today's presentations, as well as the comments by all delegations, will be reflected in the corresponding minutes of this special meeting. I thank all of you for your participation. This meeting is adjourned.